Sorry about the wind, but here's another project. It's a Honda CBR125. Sat outside for around 4 years, but it sat 6 years prior to that in the garage, so it hasn't been started or used in 10 years. There's a number plate so you can do your check. It was bought brand new from the guy that I got it from, the lady that I got it from actually. She had moved from London and then she used it in London as a commuter bike, and then she fell pregnant and with her firstborn child just over 10 years ago, and it wasn't used since. It has only covered 1,593 miles from new. Original exhaust, everything is original on the bike. I've got all the booklets with it, even the sale receipt from when she bought it brand new. So if you're interested in seeing this bike be torn down, checked over and rebuilt, give it a like. And if you're interested in seeing it run for the very first time, please stay tuned for the next video. See how dry rotted these are. They're absolutely solid. These rubber hoses. There's the tank breather pipes. So we'll replace all those. It didn't have a battery in it, so the owner must have taken that out before they stored it. The only thing I found that the tank is completely empty on the bike, which is just down there. But which I thought, okay, well maybe the previous owner had drained the fuel before they stored the bike. You know, they're taking the battery out, but I think it's quite evident that they didn't, because the last time the bike had power, it had half a tank. And what tends to happen if a bike's been sat for a long time with a carb, the bowl can become stuck, and what can happen is the fuel can continuously run through the tank and make its way into the oil of the bike, because inside this dipstick it smells of petrol. You can see that it's really full, but it also smells like fuel. So I think that's where the half a tank of fuel is. I think it's sitting in the bottom of that engine with the oil. So I wouldn't ever crank it anyway. I would have dropped the oil first and took the spark plug out and just put a bit of penetrating fluid down the piston, just in case it has got a little bit of rust in there. But yeah, so draining the oil. Next stage is take the carb off, open the carb up, clean all the jets, replace all the seals, and just do a general carb rebuild. Wide the carbs off, replace these fuel lines because they're completely shot, they're rotten, and just have a good, anything that I see that needs work will be done. I want to hear the bike run. I want to focus on the engine first. Once I know that the engine's okay, which it should be with that miles, I will then start working on the other issues. So the front brake's actually absolutely fine. It works, it doesn't stick at all, but the rear is a different story. As soon as I pushed the lever down earlier, the piston came out, clamped on the disc, and it hasn't retracted back. So as the bike is at the moment, it's completely solid. So I'll leave, hopefully by tomorrow it might free itself off a little bit enough, so when I come to take this caliper off, it will just lift off nicely, and I'll rebuild the calipers anyway, even though the front's working fine. But you don't want to ride a bike sat that long without taking the front caliper apart. So yeah, the next stage is remove the airbox and get to the carb and just see what sort of condition the carb's in, and then rebuild it, clean it out, put new seals in there, put that back on, then take all these fairings off and get to the oil, drain the oil, put some good oil in there, good fuel lines, put some fuel in the bike, and fire it up. Right, just taking off the choke, the fuel line, the air line. I've got to get the throttle cable off because the throttle's extremely stiff, and I thought that it was the slide that was sticking in the carb, but as you can see that moves nice and free. There is a rubber diaphragm up here that is a suction, so I'll have to take that off as well and check the diaphragm, make sure it's not split anywhere. While I took the airbox off, I thought I'd open the airbox, just have a look at the filter, because what I believe, like I said in the video, I think that all the fuel where it's sat has run through the carb and into the oil, because the oil smells very fuely and the tank's completely empty. And the last time the bike was on, the fuel gauge is reading half a tank, and the lady said she didn't intend to park it up, it was just parked up, she fell pregnant and never used it again, so I don't think she went through the measures of draining the fuel. So I thought I'd check the airbox, and I'm not sure, but obviously the air filter is really clean, so I'm not going to buy a new one of those. But it's also a K&N air filter. I don't think these come as standard in the Honda CBR125. If they didn't, hopefully one of you watching will know if they did or not, could let me know. But it's a K&N air filter, it's really clean, and also the inside of the airbox is really clean, so don't need to do anything there. So next video I'll have the carb, I'll strip it down and show you what condition the inside of the carb's like. I'm not expecting too much, I'd imagine it's fairly clogged up. I just hope that the diaphragm isn't split or deteriorated anywhere, because they're quite costly to replace. But see you in a second with the carb. So the carb's off, and you can see how bad the fuel is in there. I mean, you look at the main jet, completely, I'm going to spill that anyway, it stinks. So it definitely needs a major clean. All the sediment in there, so I'll clean that out, replace this seal. If the jet's way too dirty or clogged up, then I'll just replace the main jet. So I'll rebuild the bottom end, clean it out, and then I'll take the diaphragm out and inspect that for any tears. But really dirty. Right, so we're going to drain the oil. I suspect it's got I think it's probably got fuel in the oil, like I said, judging by how empty the tank was and by the smell of the oil. Yep, you can see that's got fuel in there, extremely watery. See how watery that is. I'll take this out so there's a bit of flow. You can see how thin that is. That's definitely got petrol in the oil, so it's a good job that we're draining it. So what happens as the float gets stuck over time, the fuel in the tank can seep through and continuously run through the bike, resulting in the fuel mixing with your oil. Just stand it up. And I'll just leave that to drain. The washer's in there somewhere. I'll get it out in a minute. See how watery it is, and the smell of it, it just smells like pure petrol. So it's a good job we're draining that. And there's only supposed to be a litre of oil in there, and there's a lot more than a litre of oil in there. Right, this is just a little update on the CBR125. We've cleaned the carb, changed the oil. You could see the fuel that was inside of the oil, which my first thought was that the bowl that was inside the carb had obviously got congealed over time with the old fuel and caused the bike to flood itself, filling the sump with oil, with fuel and oil. But that wasn't the case. Even though the carb was in a really bad condition, as you can see in the video, the float was moving really free, and also the float needle valve was also free inside its little seat. So it got me thinking, you know, what else could cause it? The Honda CBR uses a vacuum type fuel system. So once the bike started, you'll have an airline coming off of the intake just behind the carb, running to the tank, which pressurizes the tank, which allows fuel to build pressure, push through into the carb. Obviously, the more RPMs you do, the more pressure builds up, the more fuel your bike gets. So I thought, well, the tank's off, let's give the diaphragm a test. So this sits inside your tank, and it screws up to your tank, and this section here sits outside the tank. Bottom is an air hose that connects to the intake, and the top is your fuel line, so that connects to the carb. What this should do is when you go on YouTube, I remember years ago I wanted to know how these work, and you've got 20-minute videos explaining that this is the diaphragm. Easy way to find out if it works: if you put a nice clean hose onto your diaphragm, make sure you're putting it on the bottom, which is your airline, and then you just suck it. And if you suck, you apply vacuum, and it's a continuous suction, and it will not hold, the diaphragm will not close enough for it to seal. That means that the diaphragm inside there, the little rubbers, have split or perished. So as you can imagine, say for instance, let's put it in simple terms, you get a McDonald's straw, you suck your Coke up, and you put your tongue on the end of it. The Coke will stay inside the straw. As soon as you remove your tongue, the fluid will just drain straight away because there's flow. Same with this. If this diaphragm isn't closing and it's allowing a draw for the fuel will just continuously keep running through this diaphragm, through the carb, through the engine, and the fuel will then make its way to the sump, which is what's happened. This bike, over time, it sat for a long period of time, the diaphragms gave out, and that's allowed the fuel then to run through the engine into the sump. So easy way to test it: put a fuel line on the airline section of the thing and suck. What you should be able to do is get a nice vacuum on there, put your tongue on the end, and it should hold that vacuum, and then as you pull your tongue off, it'll make a little pop sound. That's an evidence that it's working. It's stopping the draw. So I got this. It holds it. If I suck really hard, it'll hold it for about a second. But nothing. It's leaking. The more vacuum I apply on that, the more the air comes out. So this probably would work on the bike, but the vacuum's obviously, it's still got a little hold there, but it's still going to allow fuel to bypass the carb and make itself into the sump of the bike. So I've had to order a new one of these. I'm waiting for that. Once that arrives, I will then wash the tank out with some fresh fuel, just in case there's any dry sediment inside the tank. I've taken the spark plug out of the CBR. I've put some penetrating fluid in there just in case there is a little bit of rust in there, a bit of moisture's got in there as it sat over time. I don't want to score the cylinder barrel. I want to, keep it as easy as possible to start the bike. So I've done that. So once the diaphragm's here, I can put the tank back on, fill it with fuel, and fingers crossed it will run. Once it runs, then I can start stripping down the brake calipers, rebuilding those, take the front forks off. I'm going to see if I can get rid of the pitting that's on the front forks with a WD-40 and a 1500 grit sandpaper to try and sand them smooth. If that doesn't work, then I'll just buy a set of second-hand forks from eBay. to you it's going to be a couple of seconds, but I'm just waiting a couple of days for, no, actually I'll probably just release the video of how far I've got now, and then the next video will be the bike starting for the first time, and fingers crossed there's no other issues or no hidden issues with the bike. I can't imagine there's going to be too many, considering the bike has only just done just under 1,600 miles. It is a Honda. These CBRs are well known for their reliability. I am a little bit concerned as there was a lot of fuel inside that oil. I just hope it hasn't perished any of the seals inside the engine, but we don't know until we get it running. So the bike's got fresh oil in there. I've put a 1040 Castrol oil into the bike. The carb's completely cleaned. The main jet was relatively simple to clean, but the pilot was so blocked I nearly gave up and just ordered a new one. But online, trying to find the standard specs for the carb on this bike, it's like some people are saying 118, some people are saying 128. So I really didn't know what size pilot jet to order, because the pilot jet inside this bike was so corroded that you couldn't see the number on there. Luckily I managed to get some wire, and I roughed up the wire using a little hacksaw, so it was kind of rough to the touch, put it in there, and I just kept on circling it inside until it dug its way through the build up inside the pilot jet. Once that had done, I used some carb cleaner down there until I could freely pass the wire through the pilot jet. So that's nice and clean now. The carb's back on. The diaphragm in the carb was really good condition, no deterioration in there. The oil's been drained, it's got new oil in there. It's also got a new spark plug in there. So I'm just waiting on this vacuum fuel. I can't remember what they're actually called. Yeah, I'm waiting on the vacuum on-off valve, fuel valve that sits on the bottom of the tank to arrive. Once that's here, I will then see if the bike starts. Thank you for watching. I'd appreciate any comments, good or bad. I'm not a claimed motorbike mechanic. I'm a self-taught mechanic, self-taught myself from a young boy from motocross. I'm a roofer by trade, so this isn't something that I do for a living. This is just something I do as a hobby. I enjoy all types of motorbikes, whether it's an enduro bike, a moped, a Chinese bike, any sort of motorbike. I just enjoy them. I enjoy working on them. I enjoy seeing them run again and live, and making a little bit of profit out at the end of them once they're running and roadworthy with an MOT. I get to sell them on and make a little bit of money, and I get to enjoy doing it. So if you guys like the videos, you've got any questions of your own about bikes, I'm fairly knowledgeable. I've worked on so many different types of bikes over the years. Since I passed my full bike test 8 years ago, I've worked on so many bikes, road bikes, DRZ 400s, Bandit 600s, Bandit 1200s. There's so many, CRF 250Ls, Piaggio Zips, all types of Chinese bikes. I've worked on a lot of Chinese motorbikes because they seem to pop up relatively cheap on Facebook Marketplace. Motorbike mechanics don't want to touch them because they've got a thing about working on these Chinese bikes. I end up picking them up fairly cheap and get them running. So I've worked on all types of Chinese bikes. Majority of the scooters are the same. They're all got the GY6 engine in them. So if you have any questions on any bikes, you need a little bit of help, just write in the comment section and I'll try and help you out as much as I possibly can. But thank you for watching the video. I would appreciate if you could like the video and maybe subscribe for more. Every time I buy a bike now to do up, I'll stick it on my channel. I never used to. I've been doing this for years, fixing and selling bikes. So now that I quite enjoy doing YouTube, so I quite like going back to them and watching myself. So if you like the video, just give it a thumbs up, and I appreciate any feedback. Thank you.